50 commonly confused words in English, along with their meanings to help clarify the differences. Accept versus accept. Accept, to agree or receive. Accept, exclude. Adverse versus averse. Adverse, harmful or unfavorable. Averse, having a strong feeling of opposition. Allude versus allude. Allude, to refer to indirectly. Elude, to escape or avoid. Illicit versus illicit. Illicit, to draw out or provoke. Illicit, illegal or forbidden. Stationary versus stationary. Stationary, not moving. Stationary, paper, pens, and office supplies. Complement versus compliment. Compliment, something that completes or enhances. Compliment, a praise or admiration. Site versus site. Site, to reference or quote. Site, a location or place. Conflict versus conflict. Conflict, a disagreement or struggle. Conflict, a technical variation, typically a typo of conflict. Hoard versus hoard. Hoard, to collect and store something in large amounts. Hoard, a large group or crowd, often referring to people or animals. Insight versus insight. Insight, to encourage or stir up. Insight, deep understanding or awareness. Infer versus imply. Infer, to deduce or conclude. Imply, to suggest without saying directly. Precede versus proceed. Precede, to come before. Proceed, to continue or go forward. Eminent versus imminent. Eminent, famous or well-known. Imminent, about to happen. Loose versus loose. Loose, not tight or free. Lose, to misplace or fail to win. Farther versus further. Farther, physical distance. Further, more advanced or additional. Gait versus gait. Gait, a person's manner of walking. Gate, a movable barrier or entrance. Implicit versus explicit. Implicit, implied or understood without being stated. Explicit, clear, direct, and stated openly. Cereal versus cereal. Cereal, a breakfast food. Serial, something happening in a sequence. Peak versus peak. Peak, the highest point. Peak, to stimulate or arouse interest or curiosity. Principle versus principle. Principle, head of an institution or the main thing. Principle, a fundamental belief or rule. Altar versus altar. Altar, to change or modify. Altar, a religious or ceremonial table. Bear versus bear. Bear, without covering. Bear, an animal or to endure. Capital versus capital. Capital, a city where a government is located. Capital, a building where legislative bodies meet. Breach versus breach. Breach, a violation or gap. Breech, the back part of something, often in reference to a firearm. Cordial versus cardial. Cordial, warm and friendly. Cardial, related to the heart, sometimes used in medical terms. Capital versus capital. Capital, a city where a government is located. Capital, a building where legislative bodies meet. Illicit versus illicit. Illicit, to draw out or provoke. Illicit, illegal or forbidden. Humorous versus humorous. Humorous, the bone of the upper arm. Humorous, funny or amusing. Stationary versus stationary. Stationary, not moving. Stationary, paper and office supplies. Censor versus censure. Censor, to examine and remove objectionable material. Censure, to express disapproval. Cite versus cite. Cite, to quote or reference. Cite, a location or place. Hoard versus hoard. Hoard, to collect and store something in large amounts. Hoard, a large group or crowd, often referring to people or animals. Breathe versus breather. Breathe, to take air into the lungs. Breather, a short rest or pause. Compliment versus compliment. Compliment, something that completes or enhances. Compliment, a praise or admiration. Loose versus loose. Loose, not tight or secure. Lose, to fail to win or misplace. Effect versus effect. Effect, to influence. Effect, a result. Antique versus antiquity. Antique, an old object, often valuable. Antiquity, the ancient past, especially the civilizations of the Mediterranean. Build versus build. Build an invoice or statement of charges. Build, to construct or create. Peak versus peak. Peak, the highest point. Peak, to stimulate or arouse interest or curiosity. Alternate versus alternative. Alternate, to happen in turns or in succession. Alternative, a choice or option. Confidant versus confident. Confidant, a trusted person to whom one can confide. Confident, self-assured or certain about something. Insure versus insure. Insure, to make sure something happens. Insure, to protect with insurance. Fewer versus less. Fewer, used for countable nouns. Less, used for uncountable nouns. Faint versus faint. Faint, to lose consciousness or weak. Faint, a deceptive movement. Adopt versus adapt. Adopt, to take on or accept something, e.g. a child. Adapt, to adjust or modify. Prosecute versus persecute. Prosecute, to initiate legal action against. Persecute, to oppress or mistreat someone. Prescribe versus prescribe. Prescribe, to recommend or authorize treatment. Prescribe, to forbid or ban.